When Margaret Williams entered the last figures at her desk, the evening light was already streaming through the windows of the Chicago high-rise. She had established herself as one of the most accomplished accountants in the past 5 years, securing a solid position as a financial advisor for major corporations. But today, as on many days, her thoughts drifted away from work to her parents living in Denver. "Margaret, this quarterly report is excellent," her boss Thomas said, stopping by her desk and patting her shoulder lightly. "Thank you, Thomas. It took some time, but I'm satisfied with the results," Margaret smiled back, even as she felt her phone vibrating. Looking at the screen, she saw a message from her mother. "Maggie, the money for this month is a bit late. Did something happen? Our heater broke down, and we need money for repairs." Margaret sighed. Maggie, that nickname brought back childhood memories. Her parents only called her that when they wanted something. In her family, her sister Britney had always been the center of attention. Margaret was 8 when Britney was born. Her sister was an adorable baby with blonde curls and blue eyes, and her parents, especially her mother Carol, doted on her. Her father John was the same. "Our little angel," he always called Britney. Margaret pushed the memory away and replied to her mother's message. "I'll send the money today. Sorry to hear about the heater troubles." She opened her online banking and transferred the usual $2,000 to her parents' account. This took up a significant portion of her monthly salary, but Margaret viewed it as her own form of atonement. When her parents said they had run out of retirement funds, there was nothing else she could do. After work, Margaret returned to her compact one-bedroom apartment. It wasn't luxurious, but it was clean and had a peaceful atmosphere. While preparing a simple dinner in the kitchen, she again found herself thinking about her relationship with her parents. During her childhood, her birthday presents had always been modest compared to her sisters. Her parents hadn't shown up at her high school graduation. It coincided with Britney's dance recital. Still, she loved her family. And when she learned they were in financial straits, she didn't hesitate to offer support. As she was taking her meal out of the microwave, Margaret's phone rang. It was Britney. "Maggie," a bright, cheerful voice exclaimed. "I heard from Mom that you sent money. You're truly the best sister ever." "You're welcome, Britney," Margaret replied calmly. "I'm glad I can help our parents." "Yes, you're always so dependable," Britney took a breath and continued. "By the way, have you seen my Instagram? I've started a new fashion blog. I'm getting more followers." Margaret smiled. Since graduating from college, Britney had never held a steady job, focusing instead on building her social media presence. "I'll check it out, I promise," she replied. "How's the job search going?" There was a moment of silence on the other end. "Oh, that. I'm focusing on my blog right now. Besides, the job market in Denver is terrible. But don't worry, I'll find something soon." The conversation continued superficially as usual, with Margaret listening warmly to her sister's chatter. After hanging up, she ate her modest dinner while considering next month's budget. There were few luxuries for herself, but she was content. The satisfaction of helping her family was irreplaceable. The next morning, Margaret was filling out a vacation request form. She was planning to visit her parents for the first time in 6 months. She had already prepared gifts, a favorite whiskey for her father, perfume for her mother, and a designer scarf for Britney. "Taking time off?" "That's unusual," her colleague Sarah asked, stopping by her desk. "Yes, I'm going to visit my parents. It's been a while." "That's nice. Denver is beautiful this time of year, isn't it?" "Yes, the mountains are truly spectacular." That afternoon, when Margaret emailed her parents about her visit, she received an unexpected reply. "We're a bit busy this weekend. Could you come another time?" Margaret frowned at the screen. Her vacation request had already been approved, and her flights were booked. She decided to call. "Mom, is something wrong? Why can't we meet this weekend?" Carol's voice sounded tense. "We have a packed schedule. I won't be able to give you proper attention." "That's fine, I just want to see you." I don't need to stay long. But. Carol hesitated. Is there something you're hiding? Margaret asked intuitively. Of course not. Carol raised her voice slightly. We're just busy. But if you insist on coming. All right, I'll come as planned. Don't worry, Margaret said calmly. After hanging up, she felt strangely uneasy. Why would her parents try to avoid her visit? On the plane to Denver, Margaret gazed at the clouds outside. As a child, she often looked up at the sky, imagining stories from the cloud shapes. Now, she reflected on the irony of her life story. The girl who was always second best had become the pillar supporting her family. After arriving at Denver International Airport and picking up her rental car, Margaret entered her parents' address into the GPS. Driving through the city, she felt warmed by the familiar sights. Denver's mountains, blue skies, and streets filled with childhood memories. However, on her way to her parents' house, Margaret witnessed an unexpected scene. A familiar figure stood in front of a luxury car dealership. She instinctively pulled over, put on her glasses, and peered closer. There were her parents and sister, standing in front of a gleaming new Tesla, smiling for photos. Margaret's heart began to race. The words, "We've run out of retirement funds," echoed in her mind. There must be some explanation, she told herself, deciding to stay in place and observe without getting out of the car. Margaret hid behind an SUV, watching the scene unfold before her. Her parents and sister stood in front of the Tesla dealership in an elegance she had never seen before. Her mother Carol wore an expensive designer dress that Margaret could never have afforded with the money she sent, with emerald earrings glittering in the sunlight. Her father John was dressed in a perfectly tailored navy suit, wearing a clearly new luxury watch instead of his old worn one. And her sister Britney was clothed in the latest fashion brands, looking sophisticated beside their parents. The scene was so drastically different from "We've run out of retirement funds" that Margaret felt confused. Was this where the $2,000 she struggled to send each month was going? The Tesla salesman approached the three, handing over the keys. Father John took them with a broad smile and embraced Mother Carol. Britney let out a small cheer and started posing with the car for her smartphone. "Dad, this will make my Instagram posts so much more glamorous," Britney said in a voice full of joy. "Yes, our family finally has a car worthy of our status," John replied, puffing out his chest. Margaret felt a sickening sensation in her stomach. She struggled with whether to confront them or simply leave. Maybe there was an explanation, a lottery win, or an unexpected inheritance. But the next moment, words reached her ears that changed everything. "She'll never know we're buying it with her money," Mother Carol said laughingly, without a trace of guilt. "She's the best ATM ever." Britney giggled. "Sending $2,000 every month gave us enough for a down payment." "Margaret always does everything for the family," Father John added. "We might as well take advantage of her sweet nature. If we keep making excuses like 'the heater broke' or 'the roof needs repairs,' she'll keep sending money." The three laughed together. Margaret's heart turned ice cold. It was as if years of questions suddenly found their answers. Britney's expensive jewelry at Christmas. The photos of luxurious restaurant meals on social media despite her parents claiming medical expenses were piling up. And the recent increase in emergency assistance requests. Margaret opened the car door with trembling hands and quietly slipped inside. Something inside her felt like it was breaking. Had all the family bonds she believed in, her own self-worth, all been lies? Sinking into the seat, Margaret rested her forehead on the steering wheel. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Waves of anger and sadness washed over her, making it difficult even to breathe. Memories from her childhood flooded her mind. Her parents enthusiastically applauding at Britney's dance recitals. The night her academic award was ignored. Being told when she wanted to go to college, "If you can't get a scholarship, forget it. We're saving money for Britney's education." Still, she had continued to love and support her family. Outside, the three were preparing to get into their new Tesla. Margaret drove away before they noticed her. It was a moment when something definitive broke inside her heart. On the flight back to Chicago, the clouds outside the window no longer spoke stories to her. Margaret's heart was filled with determination. Never again would she be exploited. Enough was enough. Back in her apartment, she took immediate action. First, she logged into her online banking system and canceled the automatic monthly transfers to her parents. Next, she contacted her lawyer friend Elizabeth Morrison and requested an urgent consultation. "Margaret, this is unusual at this hour," Elizabeth said over the phone. They had been friends since college. "Liz, I need to see you right away. I've realized something terrible." Margaret's voice was calm, but anger swirled beneath it. "Of course. How about tomorrow morning?" "What happened?" "For a long time, I've been deceived. I finally realized I've been my family's ATM." The next morning, Margaret explained everything in Elizabeth's office. The amount she had been sending monthly, the frequency of her parents' emergencies, and the incident she witnessed at the dealership with the conversation she overheard. "This is clearly financial abuse," Elizabeth said with a stern expression. "Your goodwill was exploited." "I want your advice on what I should do," Margaret said. "Should I cut ties with them completely? Or confront them?" Elizabeth chose her words carefully. "First, cut all financial connections. You've already done that. Second, I recommend keeping some distance for a while. A direct confrontation would likely only result in excuses, denial, or emotional manipulation." Margaret sighed deeply. "Yes, that's probably what would happen. You could send a brief message explaining why you've stopped supporting them. But don't engage in further explanations or discussions." Before leaving the office, Margaret sent the same message to her parents and Britney. "No more money transfers. Your ATM is closed." The moment she pressed send, she felt a sense of liberation. Her wounded heart hadn't healed yet, but for the first time, she felt she had asserted her own worth. Less than 10 minutes after receiving Margaret's message, her phone began to ring. Her father John's name appeared on the screen. She declined the call and switched her smartphone to silent mode. Following Elizabeth's advice, she decided to avoid direct dialogue. That evening, with Elizabeth's help, she took further measures. All emails from her parents and Britney were automatically forwarded to a specific folder so they wouldn't immediately catch her eye. She considered changing her phone number but realized it wasn't practical with so many work contacts. Instead, she added her family's numbers to her block list. "This should give you some peace for now," Margaret told Elizabeth. The two were having dinner at Margaret's apartment. "But they'll soon try to contact me through other means." "That's right," Elizabeth replied, raising her glass of red wine. "When the money flow stops, they'll panic. Especially considering that Tesla loan." The next morning, as Margaret predicted, she received a call from her company's receptionist. "Ms. Williams, there's an urgent call from your parents. They've been calling repeatedly." "Thank you, Jessica," Margaret replied in a calm voice. "I'm sorry, but for personal reasons, I don't want to speak with them. If they call again, could you give them my lawyer Elizabeth Morrison's contact information?" The cheerful receptionist looked somewhat confused but nodded. "Understood, I'll let them know." In the afternoon, Margaret received a message from her mother Carol to her company email address. "Maggie, what's happening? Why can't we reach you suddenly? If it's about money, there might be a misunderstanding. Call me right away. I'm worried." She forwarded the email to Elizabeth and requested a draft reply. She wanted a calm legal perspective. 20 minutes later, Elizabeth sent a suggested response. "Mrs. Carroll, this is Elizabeth Morrison, the lawyer representing Margaret. All future communications with Margaret will be handled through me. Margaret witnessed the incident and conversation at the Tesla dealership in Denver, and the cessation of financial support is a result of that. If you have any questions, please contact my office." Margaret approved the reply and sent it. At least now her parents would understand what she knew. That evening, a flood of text messages began arriving from Britney, sent from an alternative phone number. Margaret read the messages but didn't reply. Instead, she blocked Britney's new number as well. The next morning, she temporarily deactivated all her social media accounts. Protecting her mental health was the priority. "Am I doing the right thing?" she asked Elizabeth a few days later as they had lunch together. "Sometimes I think I'm being too harsh." "Margaret," Elizabeth looked at her with a serious gaze. "You've been exploited for years. Setting boundaries is self-defense, not punishment. The moment they treated you like an ATM, the family trust was already destroyed." Margaret silently picked at her salad. "But they're my family." "Yes. That's why this period is necessary. If there is to be true reconciliation, it can only happen after they acknowledge their actions and show genuine remorse." About 3 weeks after stopping her support, Margaret was working in her office when she received a message from their mutual friend Linda. "Britney is causing a scene on social media. You might want to check it out." Driven by curiosity, Margaret temporarily reactivated her account and checked her sister's Instagram page. There was a series of posts. In the first post, Britney appeared with a sad expression, accompanied by a long caption. "Facing a family crisis. My sister suddenly cut off all aid, and my parents are financially struggling. How can a blood sister abandon her aging parents? Please send prayers and support." The next post showed a photo of her parents' house, with the text, "They might have to give up this house. My sister earns millions yet refuses to help." Margaret smiled wryly. She didn't earn millions. In fact, she had been cutting into her own savings to support her parents. Looking at the comments section, she found an unexpected development. Many of Britney's friends had left questioning or critical comments. Margaret put down her smartphone and exhaled deeply. Britney's performance seemed to be backfiring. "Lies always come to light eventually," she whispered to herself. That night, Margaret met with a psychological counselor for the first time. On Elizabeth's recommendation, she visited Dr. Julia Chen, who specialized in family issues. "Did I do the right thing?" Margaret asked at the end of the counseling session. "Ms. Williams," Julia answered slowly. "Rather than thinking in terms of right or wrong, let's consider what's necessary for your own health and well-being. Sometimes, strict boundaries are needed to break out of a pattern of exploitation that has lasted for years." Margaret took those words to heart. A month after she stopped her support, Elizabeth contacted her. "I heard from the Tesla dealership. Your parents have started missing loan payments. They're trying to contact you, but of course, I've blocked them." "I see," Margaret replied calmly. Complex emotions swirled within her, but she felt less pain than before. "They really were dependent on my money." "It seems so." Carol said in her last call, "We truly can't even pay for charging." Margaret smiled ironically. "Britney, I'm sorry, but we can't hire you," the interviewer said across the table, causing Britney to catch her breath. This was the third rejection this week. The interview at a small marketing firm in Denver had also ended in failure. "But I have lots of social media followers. I heard that's important for marketing these days," she desperately argued. The female interviewer smiled tiredly. "Your Instagram follower count is indeed impressive, but experience and skill sets are also important. And..." She hesitated for a moment as if choosing her words. "Your recent personal posts didn't align with our company's values." Britney couldn't say anything. She hadn't expected her posts denigrating her sister to come back to her like this. Leaving the office, Britney looked at her phone's contact list, once full of friends. But now, with the fragile foundation of her luxurious lifestyle crumbling, there were surprisingly few people she could contact. Returning to her apartment, she found her parents watching TV in the guest room. Their expressions had lost their former cheerfulness. "How was the interview?" Carol asked. "Terrible," Britney replied, dropping her shoulders. "Failed again." "That's troubling," John sighed. "The mortgage payment is already 3 months late. We got a notice from the bank." The air felt heavy. The Tesla had already been repossessed, credit card payments were behind, and now even their house was in jeopardy. The three could only watch their world collapse. "Let's contact Maggie," Britney suggested. "She might help us." "Impossible," John said bitterly. "That lawyer is blocking all contact. And if she heard our conversation at the dealership, it's too late." Britney retreated to her room and lay on her bed. For the first time, she felt truly alone. When she picked up her smartphone, her followers had decreased by more than half. Despite her flashy posts, as the truth about her family's financial situation came to light, many people had distanced themselves from her. A few weeks later, Britney was packing a small bag with essential belongings. "Are you really going to Chicago?" Carol asked anxiously. "There's nothing here, Mom," Britney answered quietly. "At least Chicago has more job opportunities." And she left her words hanging. Deep down, she wanted to apologize to Margaret, but she didn't have the courage to tell her parents. Arriving in Chicago, Britney rented a small apartment in the suburbs. Her savings were minimal, but she managed to find an affordable place. However, job hunting proved more difficult than expected. Her resume had too many blank periods. "What have you been doing since college graduation?" The same question was repeated in every interview. The answer, "I was aspiring to be a social media influencer," only made most employers frown. After failing her fifth interview, Britney found a small advertisement in a local newspaper. Northside Community Center, seeking administrative assistant. No experience required. Motivation valued. The next day, she visited the community center. The building was old but had a warm atmosphere. After introducing herself at the reception, a middle-aged woman named Eleanor Jones, the center director, greeted her. "Ms. Williams, welcome," Eleanor said with a warm smile. "I've reviewed your resume, and frankly, your experience is limited." Britney nodded. "Yes, but I'll work hard. I really need a job right now. The work here is mundane. Filing documents, answering phones, sometimes helping with events. The salary isn't high." "That's fine," Britney replied seriously. "I want to make a fresh start." Eleanor stared at her for a moment, then smiled. "Let's start with a 1-week trial period." A few days after starting work, Britney was surprised to see Margaret Williams' name prominently displayed on the donors wall in the center's hallway. "Do you know Margaret Williams?" Eleanor asked, noticing her surprised expression. "She's my sister," Britney replied in a small voice. Eleanor's eyes lit up. "Oh, how wonderful. Margaret is one of our biggest supporters. Thanks to her, our after-school programs for children and services for the elderly can continue." Britney was speechless. She hadn't known her sister was involved in such things. "She volunteers too. She comes at least once a month to read to the children, and sometimes helps with accounting consultations," Eleanor continued. "She's truly a remarkable person." That night, Britney was thinking about Margaret in her apartment. Her sister had paid for part of her moving expenses on the condition that she wouldn't show her face. At the time, she had taken it for granted, but now she felt differently. The next weekend, Britney was assigned to organize old photo albums at the center. She pulled a dusty album from a box. As she turned the pages, a 15-year-old photo appeared. There was young Margaret, wearing a graduation gown, smiling surrounded by the center's staff. "What is this photo?" Britney asked Eleanor. "That's Margaret's college graduation," Eleanor smiled nostalgically. "Since her family couldn't come, we staff members rushed over. She was volunteering here while attending college, so everyone wanted to celebrate her success." Britney couldn't move as she stared at the photo. On that graduation day, she was 14 and had gone to Disneyland with her parents. She had completely forgotten about Margaret's graduation, or rather, hadn't even cared. "She went to college on a scholarship," Eleanor continued. "She didn't have family support, but she paved her own way. She was such a strong girl." Britney went home early that day. Arriving at her apartment, she pulled out an old notebook from her belongings. It was Margaret's middle school diary, which she had taken from home during the move. She had taken it half-jokingly then, but now she was curious about its contents. With trembling hands, she turned the pages and found young Margaret's anguish written there. Another dance recital for Britney today. Dad and Mom bought her a new video camera. They didn't celebrate my science fair victory, but I'll try not to mind. Someday they'll recognize me. And on another page. Mom doesn't want to hear about my college plans. She said, we need to save money for Britney's future. But it's okay. I'll apply for scholarships. I'll definitely go to college and succeed on my own. Britney felt her vision blur with tears. She closed the notebook and gazed out the window. The lights of Chicago floated in the night sky. Somewhere in that light, Margaret was there. She sat at her desk and took out some stationery. Hi Maggie, this is Britney. I have something to tell you. She began writing a letter but rewrote it many times. No words seemed sufficient to compensate for years of neglect and exploitation. In the end, she put the half-written letter in a drawer. She still didn't have the courage to send it. Chicago's winter was harsher than usual, and beautiful frost patterns decorated the windows of Margaret's apartment. A year had passed since she stopped providing support, and her life had changed quietly but surely. Her career as a private financial advisor was going well, and last year she had saved adequately for the first time. Without the remittances to her parents, she now had time and money for herself. She had started attending pottery classes on weekends and began the small stock investments she had dreamed of for years. Above all, there was a confidence in her eyes that hadn't been there before. She maintained a limited relationship with her parents. At Margaret's suggestion, they agreed to talk on the phone just once a month. They had sold their house and moved to a smaller apartment. The luxurious lifestyle was gone, and they now relied on Social Security benefits. The phone conversations were superficial and sometimes awkward, but she was no longer exploited as before. The strict boundaries Margaret had set created an odd balance. While organizing the house, I found many of your old photos, her mother Carol said during last month's call. Her voice had a rare tinge of regret. Your science fair trophies and college transcripts too. Carol faltered. We should have been proud of you. Margaret didn't know how to respond to those words. It was the recognition she had longed for years, but it seemed too late now. Still, a part of her heart was moved. On Christmas Eve, Margaret was volunteering at the Northside Community Center. At a celebration for children, she was in charge of reading picture books. As the last child left and the staff began cleaning up, she saw a familiar figure coming out of the office. It was Britney. Maggie. Britney's voice trembled. For a long time, they stared at each other without exchanging words. The memory of shared blood and the pain of broken trust hovered in that silence. I heard from Eleanor that you work here, Margaret broke the silence. Britney nodded. For 9 months now. I hear about you a lot here too. I see. Maggie, I want to tell you. Britney struggled for words. I am truly sorry. For using you, for making fun of you. I was the worst sister. Tears welled up in her eyes. Margaret didn't move. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Britney continued. I just wanted you to know. I'm trying to change. Working here, I've started to understand the meaning of my actions for the first time. Margaret took a deep breath. In her heart, her painful past and hope for the future violently collided. It will take time, she finally spoke. To regain trust. I understand, Britney nodded slightly. But. Margaret continued. If you'd like, how about coffee next week? I have time to talk. A small light of hope lit up in Britney's face. Thank you. As they parted, they exchanged awkward but somehow warm smiles. The road to complete reconciliation was still long, but a small step had certainly been taken. As snow continued to fall quietly on the Chicago night, Margaret and Britney each gazed out their windows in their respective places. Past pain and future possibilities intersected under the winter sky.